to the World of Warcraft podcast, The Instance, and today I'm sitting here with Chris Metzen. Chris.
Scott, it's good to see you, man.
Good to see you. How you feeling?
I'm feeling pretty good. You know, it's a crazy time. We're about to launch The War Within and, you know, really kick off this massive World Soul saga, which is a trip because, you know, I haven't shipped a video game in, you know, 8 or 9 years. So it's kind of wild going through this process again. And
I can't eat without like a video going. That's why we're watching this riff.
Excited to see what people think, and when the product finally gets into people's hands, it's one of my favorite parts of the whole development process.
Well, let me ask you this question, because you reminded me of how long this has been going. I remember firing up the World of Warcraft OG vanilla World of Warcraft and seeing a trailer that said celebrating 10 years of Warcraft. And I remember then thinking, you got to be kidding me. That's insane. That's how long I've been playing these games. And now we're 20 years on top of that, 30 years total. That has to be a little overwhelming, especially given that you were here for most of that, had a bit of a break, now you're back. Does that weigh on you? Do you feel the heat from the time? Like, how do you feel about how that
Man, I hope Chris Metzen lives forever.
I don't feel kind of heat or like the weight of time, you know, relative to expectation. It's really weird, you know, being a little older, a little wiser. Feels like 100 years ago, feels like 5 minutes ago, all at the same time. So when I look at this World Soul saga, the stuff we're building right now, thankfully there's an immediacy of it all to me. It's just, you live and die by, you know, how good, you know, the things we're sculpting in real time is. Trying to hold it all in your head, the weight of the past, you know, it's kind of beyond me. I can't really wrap my head around like all the history all at once. I mean, there's kids graduating college right now named Jaina and Anduin. It's like, what? I often find it's not all that helpful to overdo.
That's so funny because me and Vicky were talking about child names. We always do. Obviously, for those that know in the community, if we had a kid, our first kid's name would be Chewbacca Donatello. Donatello from like TMNT, Chewbacca, and then we did like a lot of Star Wars TMNT stuff for all of our names that we chose. Like we have Leia Leonardo, we have Ray Raphael, and then we have Michelangelo Solo. So awesome names. Rudolph obviously on the end of all of those, but there was a time where Anduin Lothar was really high up there, or Uther Uric, because her last name is Uric. So continuing the legacy of the Urics, naming our first, or naming like our third born son, if we had one, would be Uther Uric Rudolph. So it's really funny that he said that.
Well, you know, in the course of development, you want to keep it focused on what you're doing at the time. So that's how I try and balance it out. One day I'm sure I'll look back and go, wow. Working on this game again is really giving me more of like an immediate sense of gratification that just kind of.
Arthas is up again. That's crazy. I'm just gonna tag him and I'll pull the video back up.
You focus in the moment, and that's generally, you know, where my head is at on a day-to-day basis.
You mentioned people naming their kids after characters that you created, that you named, and that you developed and saw grow and evolve and everything. Something that's interesting about War Within so far to me is we're seeing the gang kind of back together in a much more
God, look at that cinematic. We should rewatch the World of Warcraft cinematic after this as well. That right there. This is the only teaser trailer we have of this event that sets off the start of the War Within. We go from hunting down these radiant echoes to discovering that Xalatath has infiltrated Dalaran somehow. And we have this teaser cinematic that World of Warcraft released on their actual official page, which is why it's not spoilery. It's actually canon to talk about right now because it has already come out, where Khadgar is confronting Xalatath. And it's literally, it ends after he like casts that spell, and that's it. So we have no idea what happens after that. It's going to be very, very interesting to see how we get to that cinematic and what happens after it. I am really concerned that Khadgar will perish in this intro to the expansion, and I think a lot of that's going to happen because what they talk about in this interview has a lot to do with like retiring characters and how putting some major lore characters to bed is really, really hard to do as a 20-year-old game company that wants to make games for another 20 years. So my guess is we will not be seeing Khadgar that much after this expansion.
He's there. They're all there. And what that tells me is that we're
just a prediction. I actually have no confirmation on that. That's just me guessing.
A lot of stuff that has been out there for 20 years that will finally converge in some meaningful ways. Do you want to speak to that a little bit?
I'll break it down. When I came back, I'm like, all right, let's go. World of Warcraft. Like, what do we got? What are we making? And they were in, they had already been doing War Within, or what would become, War Within, for about 10 months. While I liked what they were building and thought it was a cool next chapter in WoW, in my head, I'm like, for the 20th anniversary of WoW, like, I want to have a feeling, like, whatever the product becomes, I want to have a feeling of pulling all the toys out of the toy box, right? I think like older characters, the kind of macro themes that, the series has been about all these years, Titans, Old Gods, Light and Dark. I wanted to feel like the anniversary was capturing, like this kind of mix of all of the core flavors, and ultimately proofing out that there has been this storyline all the way through, that everything kind of converges into this crescendo. In a very real way, how the War Within was shaping up. They're like, yeah, dude, like there's no way on earth, right? That that's going to divert the course of Mighty Rivers. There's no way to get that done on top of what we're already in production on. So that begat this idea of a larger saga. I'm like, okay, well, what if we can get there in X number of steps? What if we can build to something just ridiculous?
So what he's talking about is at the end of Shadowlands, they have two teams that develop. For people who don't know how World of Warcraft is built, after Warlord or after Mists of Pandaria, they split the development team in half, and they said development team A is going to work on the next expansion, development team B is going to work on the expansion after that, because they wanted to create a expedited release schedule, and they wanted to always have something in production. So while we were always entering an expansion, the next expansion was already being worked on. So when Shadowlands got completed, Dragonflight had already basically been done. And Team A was now going to transition from working on Shadowlands to working on the War Within, right? And so they brought in Chris Metzen because of how big of a flop Shadowlands was, and they're like, hey, we need you to help us on the creative writing side of things. And Chris Metzen went, great, these are my ideas I'm pushing forward. This is where I would like to see World of Warcraft go. And they're like, that doesn't really line up with what we're doing in the War Within. What can you do with us in the War Within? And he goes, well, War Within actually is really, really well done, but what if we get these ideas later on? And that's where he developed the idea of tying the War Within storyline into the next 3 expansions. So instead of 2 teams working on 2 expansions, 1 each at a time, they went from a full development team, again, cohesively underneath one leadership with the same vision, all from one person, working on a storyline for cohesive 3 expansions. And that's where they titled it the World Soul Saga. So that's what he's discussing for those that do not know, and that is where we are right now.
Ridiculous, but it might take a couple expansions to do, and somehow folks bought in on it, like, whoa, that's wild, let's go. And so Taryn Gregory and I, Taryn's our principal story developer, so we work together every day. And
can you guys hear just fine?
We talk a lot about, like, we want to involve all these epic characters, but like when they're in the scene, they eat all the oxygen, and they could just go off and solve for X. So it's this balance between including all these mega characters and then finding clever ways to get them out of the way, you know, so that the player has maximum agency and the newer characters we're introducing have space to breathe and live.
It sounds like it is almost an advantage to come to something that had already been started. If you'd come to the end of Dragonflight and started from there, that's a little big, it's a bigger buy. It's like, well, wait a minute, where are we going now? We've been flying, okay, what does that mean? What do we do? And instead, you were presented with some beginnings, and then you got to decide where those beginnings took you.
And vector it a little bit, you know, the trick to, after all these years, you have creative direction, which even today, I don't know that I could do a thesis on, right? Creative direction is as unique as the person doing it and the chemistry of the team that you're working with. But kind of finding that balance again of having strong ideas and kind of saying like, I want to go this way, right? But the team had already been, kind of constructing this thing. So it's a mix of maximizing kind of the things that they are most passionate about, the ideas that they're kind of dug in on.
Basically, don't step on the toes of what we've already made. Work with what we've already made, and we'll make your dreams come true, but get us to that point. Take A and tie it in to B and C, and you're the guy that has to do it.
And finding a way to bend everything towards a singular purpose, but boosting their sense of ownership.
So when you got up on stage at BlizzCon,
man, he's also lost some weight. Look how big he was at BlizzCon. I remember he came out and I was all like, damn, retirement has done Chris Metzen well. Dude looks happy and healthy. And
it's pretty magical for players.
He looks like he's kind of back in form here.
I know. And a lot
looks
of
strong and healthy and
this as a
ready to go.
Return to something. And I think we're coming off an excellent expansion in Dragonflight. But you got up and did something that's
best expansion they ever made.
We're not doing the normal, here comes the next expansion, here are the features, here's the storyline in its basic way. We are going to do a trilogy of essentially games.
Craziest announcement.
You spoke a lot about bringing, tying up some loose ends, but also creating a saga that is 3 parts, at least, and setting up really the next 20 years of the game, perhaps. That's very different than what any of you have done up to this point. Did that present unique challenges to the way you wanted to create story, the way you wanted your characters to progress, these sorts of things?
Yeah, it created all sorts of complexities. Under the hood a little bit, it's interesting in how when I came back on the team, the development process and even the conceptualizing process, like where does the expansion take place? What are the main themes? What's the focus? Really had become much more democratized, right? And people were,
what that person was just doing. Environment artists are basically one of the strongest pillars of Blizzard. Their environment design, their world design, their skybox design, the zone creation is so mesmerizing and magical. And playing World of Warcraft with Victoria and watching some of these behind the scenes and seeing people do this kind of stuff. If you guys don't know, Victoria is also a content creator. She is my wife. She plays games, sim style games like Planet Zoo, and she's gonna start moving into Planet Coaster 2 and some other of those type of like simulation creation games where you've got full creative control and management control over a specific thing. Go check out her channel. It's Victoria Aura. Join the Discord. You guys will be able to see updates on when she posts content and stuff. But she sees stuff like this and she's all like, fuck, I really wish I could have gotten into that career. And I try to tell her, like, you still can, babe. Like, go into creative, environment design, figure out, go back to school and learn about these softwares and these programs that these game developers use as environmental artists, because she is a phenomenal artist in her own right, and she has such good creative ideas. And I'm always like, you should do that. It's not like I should have done that. You should go do that. So it's really funny every time that we see these like behind the scenes, and you can see people like literally moving rocks or placing plants. And it's not like the most exciting thing in the world to most people, but to like Vicky, she's like, God, I wish I would love to do that. So it's really funny to me every time I see that. It just reminds me of like the passion that my wife has for environmental design. and how she really really does have an opportunity still, and I just have to like try to nudge her in the right direction for that.
Was the focus really had become much more democratized, right? And people were, you know, had kind of found their voice in the balance of all the special teams that comprise the World of Warcraft team. You know, they'd really built the vision of Dragonflight together. So as I came back in, woohoo, and you know, there were folks going like, oh wow, how is this going to change our dynamic? You know, in terms of, you know, being a creative director, like, will we still have a voice? Will we still, you know, have stakes in how this all shapes out? So, like I was saying earlier,
Chris
kind of
Metzen's the most team player ever.
Learning that balance again, and coming in as creative director and be like, no, you know, I'm not here to be, you know, hyper prescriptive with everything as I might have been as a younger dude, but like really listening for the team's instincts.
The wisdom that this guy has, I mean, he has 35 plus years of creative design on the greatest lore story in gaming history. There's not a game. Halo is the closest, in my opinion, to world-built lore creative design, right? And that was Bungie's baby. And if you look at what Bungie's been able to do with Destiny, you can tell that those guys that are in charge of the creative design and the storytelling are extremely good at knowing what is cool and what is fun and what is interesting. And Chris Metzen is just one step above that. So when he walked away, World of Warcraft really did have its worst expansions. So to put Chris Metzen back into a creative director role was the best thing Blizzard's ever did. And the fact that he's so much wiser and so much better of a person than he used to be, and the philosophies and dynamic of Blizzard and how it's opened itself up to being a better company, how it's listening to its employees, how it respects its employees, how it's open-minded to the different outlets of personalities and people, and how they're not discriminative towards women or anything else now, and they really are a good team environment. Chris Metzen to be able to come into that environment and adapt to that surrounding, but still be able to push forward his genius, his creative genius, is why War Within is going to be the greatest expansion of all time.
Like, what are they responding to? What do they want to build? What do the artists want to make? What are they imagining in terms of that pure vision? So on top of that, the complexity of, I mean, I don't think this gives up the ghost on anything. Like, we're building 3 of these at a time. This is, yeah, I'll say it, it's insane. It's insane, right? On top of the team, you know, over a year ago, having committed to like an 8-week cadence. Yeah. So these folks are, we are moving so fast, you know, and so the difference here is, you know, guys like Taryn and I have to map out where we're going, like.
So the 8 weeks cadence that he's talking about, for those that don't know, if you guys want to watch the interview on its own, please go do that. Give it a view, give it a like, subscribe to their content channel. I'm going to pause it a bunch because I'm going to add my input here. But basically, in Dragonflight, we had the best content release schedule of all time. World of Warcraft, at its core, is a subscription-based service. You purchase the game, then you pay the development team a monthly subscription for the privilege to enjoy the story as it unfolds. In expansions like Warlords of Draenor, where we had a like 3-month cadence, or like even a 4-month cadence, where we didn't get any new content. I'm not talking dungeons, I'm not talking raids, I'm talking quest. There was not a new quest in Warlords of Draenor for like 4 months one time. In Dragonflight, they developed this brand new roadmap, this brand new goal to do an 8-week cadence. Every 2 months will be a major or minor patch. The major patch will always be a season change where we move into a new environment. There's a new raid tier, there's a new PvP season tier, there's new gear sets, and the story moves dramatically in a different direction. The minor patches are minor story developments that are crucial to the vision of what they want the expansion to turn into, but it is still a decent 10, I wouldn't even say that, probably like 2-hour campaign, right? And even though it might be minor content, from a subscription perspective, you're basically spending $30+ every 2 months for new content now, and it feels so much more you feel so much more value for the money that you're spending into the game now. It still sucks that we have to spend a subscription. It still sucks that we have to buy the game every time it comes out with a new expansion. But if you look at other games like Destiny, where they are on a pretty expedited content release schedule with their new seasons, and every time there's a new season, there's new quests and new stuff to complete, but you still have to buy that season pass. That's like a $25 purchase if you want all of the collector's stuff with it every couple months. It's very similar price point to World of Warcraft if you actually break it down to what you pay for. The difference with Destiny is if you take a break from Destiny, you can go back and purchase everything all at once if you'd like to, complete all of it all at once and move forward. It's a worse model because if you take a break from WoW, you spend $15 if you've already purchased the expansion. If you take a 3-month break from World of Warcraft, you can save $45, take that break, unsubscribe, then come back. Sorry, hold on. Let's go here. Then come back for $15 and go play through all of the content that had been released in that price point. So instead of having to spend $90 that Destiny makes you pay for, you only have to spend a subscription price to do that on top of the expansion that you originally purchased, right? So it's a lot to think about when you consider the subscription idea of it, but if the development team can stick to a really, really tight schedule, every time that we get new content, it's free content because you're already paying for the privilege to play. So an 8-week cadence is amazing,
which is its own really,
and that's what he's talking about,
work, right? You know, checking in with everybody. Does this feel cool? Everybody hip? You know, I want to make sure that we're building things that, you know, not only again my instinct feels are cool and fun, but that the team is proud to build and that they feel they have a voice in and, you know, can express themselves through where the story's going, what the ideas are. We're already mapping out, you know, whatever, 13.1 and 13.2.
We just moved into lingering memories.
How they actually play out and connect, and it's wild, but in a way.
I gotta move to the next zone, sorry.
Hey, baby. Hi, Wayne. You protecting me?
I've got a baby right here on my right. I'm not just petting nothing, I promise. We're going into Eastern Kingdoms.
You get to step back and see a far more cohesive vision and a far more refined idea over time. So, and without, without, spilling any beans, it's like, we're already talking about, the next few, post, upwards of like 17. And it's just keeping the conveyor belt going. It's like we're loud and clear. The fans want more content. More.
So he's talking about 17 patches. So every single expansion has 4 major patches. With in between each of those is the 8-week cadence patches. So you have release, minor patch, major patch, minor patch, major patch, minor patch, major patch, minor patch, release, major, 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 minor patch, major. So in every single expansion, you should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 patches of story content, right? Sorry, I was trying to put that in frame. Which means if they're working on 3 expansions, they're technically working on the next, he said 17, but in reality, it's probably more like 27 patches, right? Not all of those 20s, not all of those extra 10 that he missed out there in the counting are obviously fleshed out. A lot of the minor patches will get developed as they turn the direction to a different storyline. They might do a troll patch somewhere or something else, like something that they might not necessarily consider as a major story development, but is something that happens just for excitement purposes. That's what he's talking about, is like 17 patches. That's how far ahead this creative team is now developing the story. Like that is how much story we have to look forward to in the next couple years.
Regularly. So in a way, just staying ahead of that curve and making sure that everything, again, is of purpose and telling this much longer story. It's been a blast. You know, the pure creative on Warcraft, you know, for the past year and a half has been, how would I put it, over such a long span of time. I want to say it's one of the most nuclear creative phases I've seen for Warcraft. But the pace is wild, right? Like the pace is wild. And it's like I ain't 30 anymore, so we joke around all the time like, oh, you know, we need to start instituting, you know, company naps in the middle of the afternoon for the old folks. But it has been pretty amazing.
That's a great way of thinking about it. Speaking of personal connections to characters and story,
this is okay. I've already watched this, obviously, and like I said, if you guys want to watch it without me pausing and talking about it, go do it on your own, please. I'm gonna pause a bunch. This next aspect in this interview is so interesting, and I want to talk about it quite a lot, but they're gonna get into the life expectancy of long-term characters. Thrall has been a character in World of Warcraft, in we'll say Warcraft because not World of Warcraft, in Warcraft for almost 25 years. Okay, I'm 28 years old. I just turned 28 last week, and I've been playing Warcraft since Warcraft 3 Reign of Chaos, which I was like 7 years old at the time, right? I didn't really know what I was doing. I was just playing through the story, and it was so fun to do as a kid. But to have these relationships with these characters that I've grown up with my whole life, you know, and moving into the next 20 years of World of Warcraft, the next conversation that they have is talking about the longevity of these characters. Thrall is not a young man anymore. We've had enough time skips to where I think he's edging up towards his like late 50s, which is crazy to think about, or even like his late 40s or whatever his age actually ends up being right now. And it's like, how long can we milk Thrall as a character? And it's like, at what point do we decide this is the fitting end and this is the retirement story for this character? And he will discuss this more in his own words, and it's I definitely want to hear him talk about it, but I'm just giving my perspective on the idea of like, there in the next 3 expansions, in the next patches, I think we are going to see a significant amount of lore named characters, Thrall, Jaina, Khadgar, anyone that has a name, right? Anyone that has a unique model, have a conclusion, have a great exit from the story, either that be a fantastic sacrifice in the same way that Varian was able to sacrifice himself for the sake of his son and for the sake of the Alliance during the intro into Legion. You know, we lost Turalian, right? Legion was the last expansion Chris Metzen worked on. Okay, so if we go and we look into that expansion and we see the death of a lot of these characters that matter, Chris Metzen's not one to shy away from a fantastic fitting end. So when we talk about all of the toys are out of the box for this expansion and all the toys are getting put back onto the board and we reset the game board, everyone is at play here, it also means everyone's at risk. So don't have your hearts set on seeing Illyria for the next 10 years, right? Illyria's story could very well end in the first couple patches of this expansion. Anything is on the table. Anything can possibly happen. And I think the reason they released this interview is to kind of get people's mindset into realizing that this is a very high stakes, very realistic storyline, where in Shadowlands we had an opportunity to see a lot of characters have their story end. I think Bane and Jaina and a lot of those characters that got trapped in Shadowlands could have had a very good fitting end. That intro could have been their sacrifice, but Blizzard at the time was so afraid to lose these IPs, like the faces of the story. So moving into an area where now the fear of that is gone, the story can create some of the most iconic, memorable moments we've ever seen. And I want him to talk about it now, but just keep that in mind. Like that's my interpretation of this.
Somewhere that Chris is Anduin in some ways, kind of worn out, beaten up by a straight period of like nonstop work, right? But also on the other end of it, he's a little bit back to being Thrall again. And those two
He's sad. Welcome to stream.
two characters represent these two parts of who this person is. How much of these characters moving forward or even in the past have represented you where you were in your life? Like some people say, well, the early versions of these characters are they were so metal. Like even Tauren chieftains, they look like, you know, these metal dudes and everything. And now they're aging, right? They're maturing. They're moving on in the world. Like you are, like everyone who's worked on this does. Like, that's time. Do you think that's a fair thing to say, that we'll see these characters change and evolve in the same way that maybe you have, and that they're kind of your avatars?
Yeah, no, I know where you're going. So there's kind of an A and a B there. Like the B, which is easier, is certainly we want to push these characters forward. We want to show some aging. We are currently doing that. But yeah, we talk about that a lot. There are many new characters over the arc of the saga that we don't want to be just one-off. We want them to be, you know, pals and you know, working together to, you know, solve these big problems. But certainly the characters that have been around a while, we're trying to kind of find a way to like capture that age up, not necessarily age out, but like, okay, so in that cinematic at BlizzCon, you know, they went in and put like gray streaks in Thrall's hair. I'm like, oh,
It looked great.
it got me. It's like, whoa. And just Anduin, you know, staring you down. It's like our little boys all grows up. You know?
Yeah, for real.
Feel for him. You're supposed to feel for him, right?
Which was the point. But just the idea that these characters are moving through their own continuum and progressing and moving through stuff, like, what a trip, you know, looking back from where we started.
Sorry, Ragnaros spawned. I'm literally only here to kill the main boss, and we'll continue back with the cinematic. I just have to go tag him. Just give me a second. Hold on. I'm just relax. Everyone chill. It's gonna be fine. Just a couple more seconds. I'm just gonna literally tag him and bring it back up. But it's fun. It's great. Like I talked about at the beginning of the stream, we have entered a 5-year gap. So at the end of Dragonflight Season 4, right into the pre-patch, the moment that day release happened, because patches happen in a day, we had 5 years equivalent of game time. There was a 5-year skip that we didn't get to see as characters. It was considered an era of great peace. Not a lot happened. We talk about a little bit of the storylines that did happen, but they're really just character development stuff. Like some off-named characters had some development, some things happened, but they're not crucial to see in game, or they're not like super important to see in game. So what he's talking about with like this age up is that progression,
to the point where these
and it's cool to finally see that happen.
Characters within this setting, and it's just incredibly satisfying that way to see that progression. And certainly us as storytellers, as people, you know, as we, you know, it's not necessarily, it is certainly getting older, but it's also just experience over time. You know, big life moments, becoming parents, you know, finding love, finding your career, all these big kind of life, you know, hurdles. It's like, you know, I tell folks all the time, like, don't be afraid to pour yourself into this stuff. You know, even when you're like, oh God, will the people down the hall dig it? You know, will I be judged? Like, yes, probably. But the answer is, you're an artist. Go get it, right? Find your truth. Because often when, you know, we're pulling from a place of like deeply personal experience, someone's going to feel that on the other end of the line. You know, as you're playing the game, it's like some of those themes that really matter. Whether you're a writer, quest designer, narrative folks, cinematics, you know, like the game design, you know, like everyone kind of pours themselves into their craft, and the more genuine that is, and I think sometimes the more risk you take, I think you get more genuinely affecting content. I think people feel that, they feel you in it one way or another. There are many themes embedded in the World Soul Saga, evidenced by different characters, that are very pointedly things that I think today, or I'm struggling with today, for sure. But again, I think about it in terms of like, as the team's, you know, creative leader, that's not the job as much. I think the job.
Can we talk about real quick how unbelievably comfy these fucking chairs look? Dude, those look like the most comfortable chairs in the world. Blizzard went all out on the chairs for this interview. This is the coolest laid back most like true interview I've ever seen, because lately a lot of their interviews and a lot of their like press conversations is like they'll have someone from the community, a streamer or some type of content creator, interviewing some of the development team, right? And you could tell that everything is staged. That interview is pre-written and the responses are pre-written, where Chris Metzen, like, this just feels like we're listening in. Like, it just feels like he invited his buddy over to have a beer and his buddy's asking him about his job. And it's the most true interview I think we've ever received from a development standpoint in World of Warcraft, from Blizzard and everything. So I wish that they do a lot more of these real responses, real non-scripted interviews, and allow the people who are in charge be smart enough to improvise and actually discuss the truth of the development.
It's like trying to learn to call them out, you know, and challenge them to kind of breathe their own experience into it, as opposed to pouring my own in. So it's a balance.
I assume that's what, over time, you have a character. We'll stick with Thrall for a minute. He's, you know, probably the most well-known of the Chris Metzen. Certainly voice him. So
until they find somebody better.
Until they find somebody better, maybe you'll age out of it. I don't know.
Maybe you'll age out of it.
But no, that you've breathed enough life into that character and given them enough direction over so much time that I have to think, in a lot of cases, they start to run on their own gas. And while I'm not asking you to tell me if there's any tragedy coming at all, we're not even suggesting it here.
I have a kill list.
Do you?
I've got like my top 12 characters, like they're all going.
Why is Khadgar at the top?
So that's not, I don't even remember him saying that, but it's so interesting. Dude, we are gonna lose some major characters in this expansion. There's high stakes. Xalatath's out for blood. This is gonna be the most villainous villain we've ever had, right? Like, you have the jailer that they tried to make this gangster of a human being, this mastermind who has a plan, who's always had a plan, and all the events of World of Warcraft happened because of this plan. But like, no one died. There was no stakes. We weren't even in Azeroth. Like, everything that was happening didn't even affect anything that we ever got to do or see, which is why it felt so pathetic and dumb. We're like, Xalatath is here to take blood. She is here to stop everything that Azeroth has been, World of Warcraft has been. We are going to lose some homies. The kill list joke is, it's probably like a half joke, but also half truth. Like, he probably does have, like, these characters are done. There's nothing left for their story to be told. We are going to kill them, and in a very amazing way, and their story will end. So expect that in the War Within. There's going to be some loss going forward, man. It's going to be crazy shocking.
The list. I kid. I love Khadgar.
There's no kill list.
All right, good. But you know what I mean?
Yeah, look at that. Look at that, dude. What a meme. What a meme. Someone go make a meme of this face right here.
There's no kill list.
All right, good.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean?
There's a kill list. There's a fucking kill list. We know there is. We know there is. We're gonna say goodbye, man. Khadgar's out.
You might find yourself.
This is gonna be wild.
It might be time for Character X to take a character dive.
You know, so there's no, I'm kidding, there's no kill list necessarily, but we do talk about this stuff all the time. And the only, you know, when you start talking about knocking off main characters, it's not a...
Like, why would this interview even exist? You know what I mean? Like, this feels like such a spoiler-heavy interview to reveal the fact that you are willing to lose characters a day before the expansion drops. Like, I think this intro, based off the teaser that we had with Khadgar confronting Xalatath in Dalaran, for those that do know what happens, like, keep it to yourself, no spoilers here. I don't know what personally happens, but I know the aftermath of that confrontation, not from like a loss of character perspective, but just know, like, from a dramatic, this is the start of the expansion perspective, because I've played through the beta a little bit. But like, I think Khadgar dies in the intro of this expansion. I really do. Like, I think we will lose major characters at the very beginning of this expansion, the way that we should have with the Suicide Squad that led us into Warlords of Draenor. Like, this is going to be a very shocking intro into an expansion, the way that we lost Varian at the beginning of Legion. You know, like, no one knew that was going to happen. No one expected that to happen. It was shocking. It was completely wild, but it was such a true fitting end. I get emotional every time I see that cinematic. It hits me so hard in the feels because he's my king. He was my leader, right? So it's like, saying goodbye to some of these named characters after 25 plus years is going to be such a heavy storytelling element. And I'm very excited that we have a no fear leader back in charge of creative direction.
A small thing, and usually that is in service to in the general story you're developing. If you really need to punctuate, dramatic stakes, the easiest thing to do is ask Lucas, blow up a planet, or knock off a main character.
Tyrion Fordling, for example.
Tyrion.
Remember that?
Yeah, I do.
I do.
I'm still gripping on that one.
Yeah, that was rough. No pressure though. I'm just saying it was a rough moment.
No pressure. So we do talk about it from time to time.
Yeah.
But
it's crazy because in that intro, we didn't just lose Varian, we also lost Tyrion Fortune. He dies in that intro too. We lost two main characters at the beginning of Legion. You know what I mean? Like, damn. If that's what they're comparing this to, nobody is safe. This is Scream 3 rules, right? This is the pinnacle of epic stakes in a story environment.
But we try and frame it with the greatest
They
gravity
didn't even kill
possible,
Ysera.
and
She fucking came back.
This franchise has another 20 years in it. It's this big ongoing idea, and losing critical characters is costly. So it's, we talk about it from time to time. I won't tell you we won't lose anybody over the arc of the saga. Those types of moments are all about establishing stakes and that emotional, engagement from the player ultimately. So,
Does it help populate the World Soul Saga as a creative?
I'm in combat
place
right now. Hold on. Hey, stop. Okay.
know that over the last few years, while you were gone for much of it, the team has made a real effort or a priority out of having allied races discovered in the world.
Now, everyone isn't, like, if you're in my community and you're aware of my opinions, you know that I can't fucking stand allied races. You know that I think it's the dumbest thing they've ever added. Just make them real races. The way that they're implemented, the way that they're half-assed intros, they don't have starting zones. The coolest thing of World of Warcraft is the starting zone. It's the first identity you get to actually appreciate. When you create a Draenei, you start in Azure Mist Isle, you figure out the culture of Draenei, you figure out the technologies they have, their religion, you figure out how their architecture works, how their sources of magic, where that comes from. And with the allied races, you don't get like any of that, man. And I've always hated it, but the way Chris Metzen talks about it here has changed my perspective.
That players can not only unlock, but then be and might prefer over the originals or whatever. Like, this additional diversity for choice seems like a really potent way to fill your world with more interesting characterization rather than just, well, it's orcs and humans and a few others.
Yeah, I love it. Just old school D&D and all these options on player expression, what kind of what culture you want to be from. I love that kind of stuff. So opening that up, especially like Battle for Azeroth and the inclusion of all these new silhouettes and flavors or whatever, I thought was awesome actually. And even the ones I didn't think I would play, I wound up I rolled a Volpera.
Yeah.
Hunter, and then I consistently dress him like Robin Hood from the old Disney movie. So it's like I actually really dig a lot of the flavors that have been added over time. Like it's in my opinion, the water's warm, everybody in the pool. I think WoW can stretch, and
like I love that idea. He compares it to old school D&D, which is right. Old school D&D is like realistically hundreds of races, right? Like obviously that's over exaggeration times a billion, but there really is an infinite amount of creative background and cultures that you can develop and create in D&D. And you could do an elf that's from this area that's completely different culture than an elf from this area, and that could completely change how you play that character. And at its core, World of Warcraft will always be an RPG. So do I think allied races were not done in the way that makes them feel like an epic inclusion of culture and new flavor, new silhouette as he describes? Yes, I do think allied races were done horribly and they could have been executed better. Now, with the idea that it does add creative diversity and you are able to roleplay as a Vulpera from Vol'dun, who decided to join the Horde because of the opportunity you have to be able to see the world, and you become this explorer and you roleplay as that character. That's beautiful. That is so cool. And I really do hope that people recognize that and take advantage of that when they roll these characters. They do develop, like, you guys saw my character creation list. Like, I am a Draenei at my core soul. I love their culture, I love their ideas, I love everything about them. So when I role play my characters, I play a Draenei. I play from that culture, I play from that idea, and that's what makes it so lively, so inviting, so true to be able to play. I'm invited into this world to be able to play from a different culture background that I would otherwise never have access to. And allied races do provide you with that. Do I wish that the ones that are just cosmetic changes were not allied races for the sake of game mechanics, that they were just cosmetic changes? For example, the way that they did Eridar Draenei, where it was just a quest chain to unlock, inviting this new culture of Draenei into the Draenei team, into the Draenei character, and I could now change my skin color and my eye color and my roleplay identity with just a click of a button at the barbershop. I wish all of the allied races that represent a similar like race were like that, because it makes more sense from a game engine, but also the ones that are more new silhouettes like Vulpera were more of a full race. They were more of a starter area zone, introduction to culture. They have their own capital city, like all of those things I wish were executed better and spent more time on. But I do appreciate the idea of allied races more because of this interview.
Grow to, encapsulate all of these flavors. I think giving players more options, more visual.
Sorry, I'm just tagging him. Backing up. And going back.
Option is awesome. At the end of the day, I think, erring on the side of, player choice, player agency is the right move. Like, why you're playing this game in the first place, right? When you imprint, especially when it's your character, when you imprint on a look or a vibe or like a vision that you connect with, it's like, go get it.
So let's bring it full circle to what is imminent, which is the war within. Players have a lot of expectations. Some of it is based on just excitement because there is a 3-part saga coming. They're not used to that. There's a whole new structure to this. So what would you say to players who are pins and needles about this next expansion, the start of the big grand story?
As we were talking about earlier, we've never been in a situation where we've shaped the whole giddy up, all at once. So there's the adventure component of the War Within, and then there's the max level campaign, and then there's the subsequent patches. And it's all been designed to kind of play out over time. You have narrative threads and sinews kind of, linking everything together.
Oh shit. We got a kitty, hold on. Hey, are you not getting enough attention from Daddy?
Personally, a little biased, but I think it's off the hook, right? At the end of the day, I would want people to remember it is still only, however, part one of a much larger narrative. And I would want people to look at it that way. It's meant to rise and crescendo with its own max level campaign.
Will I be expected to walk in Quest 1 and yank the sword from the planet?
Oh, that's an interesting one. I would say to that, I'm glad you brought that up. Actually, the sword, the resolution of the sword that we started with at BlizzCon, actually, that's a 13 thing.
So when he says 13, he means 13.0 or 13 point blank. Right now, the way that they always talk about their expansions isn't by name, it's by number. Dragonflight was 10. When we entered expansions, it was 10.1, 10.2, 10.3, 10.4, right? 10.1.5. So there's the major patch, the minor patch. We talked about that a little bit. 13 will be what they currently have titled as the Last Titan. Whatever that means, right? How is there going to be the last Titan? We currently have the Pantheon. We revived them all and put them back on their course to go search for other world souls, and Illidan joined them to keep Sargeras as its jailer, right? So how do we get to the point of the last Titan, the title of an expansion? It's such an important moment in WoW history that it's the title of the expansion. That's what he's talking about. So we will not see the Sword's resolution until the last Titan expansion, which will be with an 8-week cadence schedule, 2027.
We're gonna build to that, and it's a doozy.
One does not simply yank a sword from Azeroth.
I would even say you are not prepared for that moment.
Woo!
And leave it at.
So obviously Illidan and the Titans Pantheon is obviously going to play a major role in the total World Soul Saga, and they're going to come back into play at some point. But the sword will have a resolution, and that is pretty much, the sword will be the last Titan's apex resolution moment, and whatever happens with that is gonna involve Illidan based off of that sentence alone, because you are not prepared, obviously, is a massive quote from Illy.
That, but it is a 13 issue. Ultimately, you know, things like Xalatath, we've been doing a lot of work to kind of build her up as a very different kind of villain. She is not like a Deathwing type, you know, villain where, you know, just he's flying and burning everything and like, oh crap, you know, we're gonna, you know.
It's also very interesting that he uses Deathwing as an example here and not Fireack, because Fireack would be the most recent in memory, flying around, burning everything, wanting to destroy the world just for the sake of destroying the world villain. But because Chris Metzen is of that generation that developed those previous heroes as previous villains, he uses Deathwing. I think that's so funny.
Clearly he's where the storyline ends. She's built in such a way that like we're gonna be confronted by her and face her multiple times over the arc of the saga. So it's not going to be this, you know, one and done type, like, oh, you know, she's the raid boss. You know, she's meant to, you know, kind of weave in and out of events over time. So that's something I would say, but definitely. And he uses the word very specifically here, saga. You can hear him say, you know, like, oh, you know, this saga.
Right there, he says the arc of this saga. Saga is the description of all 3 of the expansions they're planning right now, which means, in my mind, Xalatath will not have her story conclude in the War Within. Xalatath is going to be a mainstay player over the course of all 3 of these next expansions. So that's very interesting.
It's not going to be this, you know, one and done type, like, oh, you know, she's the raid boss.
Also, with how he's describing it, the reason why everyone likes Wrath of the Lich King is because Arthas is at the forefront of so many events throughout that entire expansion, from the new class, right, as a Death Knight, where you actually take quests from Arthas himself, and he's prudent in that entire quest chain to where you get to the actual capital city, to seeing him at Wrathgate and the events of a couple of the dungeons where like Arthas is a mainstay. He's in some of the quests in, you know, Zoldarak. He makes an appearance in Grizzly Hills, right? So it's like Arthas was always at the front of the story, and he was always there. The reason we were doing stuff was because of him, and we've not had a villain that was that involved since then. Like, they did a good job with Dragonflight by involving the heroes, the villains, in a lot of the story development, a lot of the questing. But Xalatath, the way that she's being presented, will feel more like an Arthas-like villain, where she will be at the conclusion of every zone. She will be intermixed into some of the dungeons. She will be some of the core reasons of the canonical changes that we see throughout things. So I'm excited to see how they will tie this villain into everything. Like, we will probably get sick of seeing her eventually. And I love that. I love that
she's
idea.
meant to, kind of weave in and out of events over time. So that's something I would say. But definitely the sword thing sticks in my head. Like certain of these themes are built to play out over time.
Literally.
So I hope
no pun intended.
Are into that. I hope they're into a longer form engagement. Because in a way, so many of our expectations kind of crystallize around like, well, wait a minute, I didn't get the full meal I was expecting in 11.0. It's not built to be that. It's built to be part 1. So buckle up. The ride will be, I hope, insane and insanely fulfilling. Going back to that promise of the 20th anniversary of World of Warcraft, like, I want this saga to feel like it is just the perfect crescendo of 20 years of storytelling, as we said at BlizzCon.
Yeah, there is a sense that we are fulfilling something.
See, I don't like that word crescendo though, because it makes me so scared that, like, obviously they talk about the future here and they talk about what happens after the World Soul Saga, and that will be something that we all have to deal with and tackle eventually. But crescendo is a conclusion, right? And World of Warcraft, I don't want it to end. I don't think anyone ever will want World of Warcraft's story who are so committed to the gameplay, so committed to the lore as much as I have been over the last 25 years of my life. Pretty much some of my earliest memories are doing stuff with Warcraft, right? Like I said, 7 years old, playing Warcraft 3 with my dad and my brother. Like, this has been a massive attachment of my life, and hearing the word crescendo is like exciting but also scary. Like, I don't want the story to conclude. I want it to get to a point to where that was an amazing chapter and then we move on to the next bit. But it seems like they're closing the book. My guess is after the saga there will be another time skip, probably 10-15 years, maybe even more than that. We will probably receive a Warcraft 4 style game where it's an RTS with massive canonical introductions of brand new characters, new leaders, new government changes, new world changes, how has Azeroth developed over this time skip, and what the next story will be introduced in an RTS. And then from there, I'm guessing we will get a WoW 2.0 style version game where it will be a full reset of a game and new system on a new engine on a new server. So my guess is, like, a lot of us have wanted WoW 2.0 because World of Warcraft is still made on the same engine it was and same servers it was 20 years ago. So getting to a new spot to where it can be upgraded, it can be made in 4K, it can be made in Unreal Engine 5 or 6 or whatever comes out at that time, right? That will be exciting, but I don't like the word crescendo because I don't think World of Warcraft's story has any place where it can stop. I just think it's going to be a significant close to a chapter or close to a book where it allows a new book to open.
The 20 years came and will end this November. I guess November's launch, right? Yeah, 20-year anniversary will be this November. And there is a feeling, I can tell you from the player side, of really coming to something special. And I know that puts pressure on the team when players collectively have an idea that they think should happen, and then the team's like, well, we're kind of going a different way. But I don't know that I've felt this much positive feedback in a long time about just where things are headed, and nobody says that about a 20-year-old property usually. Usually we're like,
there's not a lot of precedent we have, right? Like that's the same contiguous project. There's plenty of game series run for 20 years, no question. But like, it is honestly a blessing and often sometimes a hindrance. Just trying to sift through the sheer volume of all of these details. Poor Sean Copeland, right? Just trying to keep it all, make it all make sense. But it is also its principal strength, particularly because it's an MMO and a video game, because you've lived these moments. You didn't just passively watch. You didn't just, read a book or watch a movie. You've lived these moments and they matter and there are stakes, so as complex as it is to try and push the world forward without breaking everything that came before, which is its own kind of challenge. it's a very noble challenge, right? It's a privilege to tread water in this complexity of this setting. After all of these years, it's amazing that it's still the same stakes. It's still the same world that you've always
Well, there's a future I see where you're, you know, reclining in some sort of chair.
with the blanket over my
Blanket
knees.
over your knees.
Fucking
You're warm.
amazing.
You're looking back and you're thinking,
Telling kids to stay off my
wow.
lawn.
Yeah, exactly.
FDR
They're all in their
reference
happy
right there. I
seats
love
playing
it.
Whatever version of WoW they have, and looking back at Grandpa's accomplishments, and I think it looks like something to be pretty proud of already. Well, I for one could not be more excited about this
I
next
agree.
expansion and the entirety of the world of Soul Saga.
If that doesn't
and I think
tickle
you
your
and team should be
beans, if this type of content, this interview doesn't tickle your beans for how incredible this expansion is going to be, this story, the saga is going to be, I don't know what else you need, man.
proud, and I wish you guys nothing but luck in the next few weeks. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thanks so much, Scott. It was good fun. That was hard on.
So good, man. Such a good interview. I'll probably end up highlighting that and then releasing it as a YouTube video. So if you missed any of the bits, or you came back, or you missed the front part, I'll release that whole interview on YouTube. So thank you guys so much for checking that part out with me. I'm currently live playing Twitch and YouTube, playing some World of Warcraft, getting ready for the War Within patch. If you guys haven't seen it, please join me on my channel. Thank you guys so much. Until next time, play smart, play with your heart, always be red nose. Love you guys. Bye.